Good morning. This is Gaming Perspectives with
Saul
and Jolene. And today we're talking about what?
Alternatives to D&D.
I'm not sure why this question comes up all the time, but lots of people ask.
Right. I think alternatives is to... Okay, so D&D is huge, right? It's a real big game. It's probably has more players playing it than ever before. It is super popular. It's what is it? What do you call? Not only is it super popular, like a lot of people are playing it, but it's gotten the attention of media, right? The people talk about it on TV. There's news stories in magazines about the resurgence of D&D. So a lot of people kind of take take umbrage at the idea that there's this resurgence, right? Because D&D has never gone away. They make these articles make it sound like people had stopped playing D&D, and all of a sudden
it was rediscovered.
Rediscovered, right? When there's people have been playing D&D since its inception, or since it became available, published or whatever. It is super popular, so a lot of people are talking about D&D, but there are other fantasy role-playing games. Now, we're not even going to tackle other role-playing games, but we're going to stay within the genre of D&D.
We're just going to talk about two.
Yeah, and we're only going to talk about two, and maybe at the very end mention other ones that kind of have a different vibe or feel than what D&D brings. Because D&D is kind of, to me, and a lot of people say it, is this heroic fantasy, maybe even almost superheroic as far as the characters are concerned, because their power, it's a power game, right? The players become a big part of the world that they're dealing in the world that they're in.
Well, and they are the hero adventurers, right?
Right.
They're going around and killing bad guys.
Or solving the big problems, right? Solving the big problems.
Doing the things that other people don't want to do.
Right, and even a normal first level character is pretty powerful compared to a villager or a city guard or whatever. And as the character progresses in experience and goes to higher levels, it becomes more and more apparent that these characters are much more powerful than ordinary non-player characters.
Yes.
Right.
I don't know that you have answered my question about why the question always comes up about alternatives to D&D. Is it because the people are looking at the game and going, "Oh, this is too fantastical. These players can kill things and not be touched"?
I think some people regard 5th edition, especially 5th edition, because it's very difficult to not difficult to kill a character, but there's so many. It's very hard for a character to die.
They have a lot of hit points.
They have
death saves.
They have those death saves, and then after that, you can just raise the dead, right? If you have a high enough.
That's cleric. Only if you have a cleric. In your
I don't know how high of a cleric you need to be to raise the dead, but usually you can find somebody who has that spell.
Put your friend on a stretcher and take him to the nearest wizard or cleric. Because if you took him to a wizard, it'd probably be a warlock in it. If he raised him, he might not be the same.
He'd be like a zombie more than anything. Yeah, necromancy could be not very good.
Well, I just asked the question about why people are always asking this question, because I hear it all the time. And I think that it's interesting to me because if you play a game and you like it, then you're going to want to tell people about it and have them play that particular version of the game.
I agree.
But I also know that there are lots of alternatives and people like more grittier, people like different things. So if they started playing, one of the games we're going to talk about is Warhammer Fantasy Role-Playing, which, by the way, if you look it up on the internet, you need to know that there's a lot more things than just that one.
Well,
because Saul steered me in the wrong direction.
Yeah, I did do that. Warhammer Fantasy Role-Playing Game is one of the games that I listed as a good alternative. And by a good alternative, I'm not trying to say that it's a good game that you can play other than D&D. It's kind of like D&D. It's really different than D&D.
Yeah.
The whole setting, the feel, almost the genre is different, right? From D&D to the world of Warhammer. So I decided to list these two games or talk about these two games because they are very different feel and vibe than Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition.
And the system is different. The systems are obviously different, right?
Yeah, they're totally different systems. So I picked these two games because, like I said, because they're really different. And I think they're a couple of the more popular games that are out there right now. One of them is, what was it?
Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay.
Right. And it started out as an extension of the Warhammer miniatures game, right? That world, the world of Warhammer miniatures, they decided to make a role-playing game based on that world that they had made for that miniature game. And one of the things that, speaking about Warhammer Fantasy role-playing game, is that it is a very dark and grittier type of game. Characters aren't super heroic or even heroic almost to the, they're not. They're just plain old, whatever they are. I mean, they just, the way that the characters are made and the choices you have are really just plain folk who inhabit this world, and for whatever reason, by push or by circumstance, they're out there trying to either make the world better or at least keep it from sliding into worse situations or into a worse world.
The way that I read it being described was it was a medieval-ish kind of setting.
Right.
But in the old world, they say, and they by the old world, the description was loosely based on the Holy Roman Empire. So we're talking Europe, Italy, and this is the after the split of the empire.
Ah, yes.
But it is an empire, right?
Right.
And also in the character creation, which is very complicated. Well, I don't know how complicated it is, but it's old. It reminds me of the old systems, right? It's a percentile. There's 4 versions, 4 editions,
right?
And they started out with the D100. No, I mean
percentile.
Percentile system.
Yeah, D100.
Right? Two D10s, and you try to get 100. But when you're creating your character, there's a table, and
right off the bat, if you want
to,
yes,
which I always find interesting. But the table is 1 to 90 is a human, and then the rest of them, the other races that there are very few, right? There's elves and
halflings and dwarves.
There you go.
And there's 2 types of dwarves. There's forest dwarves, forest elves, and I forget what the other ones are, like noble elves or something like that.
Yes.
So there's, and then
they called it high elves.
That's right. Actually, that's an old tie into D&D. There was like gray elves and high elves and wood elves, and anyway. But so there's really only like 5 different races. There's 4 different races, and 2 of them are split between wood elf and a high elf. And you're right. The chances, if you roll on the thing is, they say you should roll on the table just to change it up a bit, not to make things interesting, I think.
Well, not only that, but in this world, the majority of the people are human, right? The other races are very small amount, population percentage.
Right. I think the way the table rolls out, it says 90% human, 4% dwarves, 4% halflings, and 1% of each of the other elves. So 2%.
Would be 2.
Yeah. Why would you want to roll on this random table? Well, if you roll on this random table, written in the rules is that you, at the end of the character creation process, you get an extra 50 experience points that you can spend after gameplay starts.
Which a lot of people would take that.
Yeah, because experience points.
Roll, okay, maybe I'll get a 98 or 99. Other than that, it's okay. I get extra points to do stuff with.
Right. Yeah. So I think, and experience points, that's a lot of experience points in the game, because you don't get tons of experience like you do like in D&D or other games like that.
So it's a lot more gritty system, and then there's tables, all kinds of tables. There's when I was watching a review on YouTube,
right,
and they were talking about when you get hit, there's a table, which totally reminded me of space opera, where you roll to see where you get hit. And then, but this one's even, I mean, it's really gritty, right? If you get hit, like in the arm, you got to roll to see if it's amputated or...
Only if there's a critical.
Only if there's a critical.
Yes.
But then you have to, it takes like a month to heal up, and you can't use that arm.
Yeah.
So it's more realistic.
Right.
It's the more gritty, realistic kind of, okay, Jolene got hit, or her character got hit, so we're gonna have to stay here for a month and
And let her heal.
yeah.
Yeah, so it does that. There's that because there's not a lot of magic, right, in this world.
And if you do decide to play a magic, then you're walking the. They have chaos is the evilish kind of thing in this world, right? So if you do decide to play as a magic user, you're going to be walking the fine line between. You might, what do they call it? Corruption, and so you're on that. You depending on which it could go one way or the other.
Right, because the whole idea is that magic comes from chaos,
Right.
which corrupts everything. And I think that's the whole point of the game, really, is that you are in a world, the empire is in decline, right? The empire is falling apart. Humans and dwarves, the empire is slowly degrading. It's the end of civilization and slowly falling apart. To add to this problem is the fact that chaos and its in different forms is invading or becoming more powerful in the world. So not only do you have the decline of the civilization, and probably because of this chaos and its corruption that it does to the world, and like I said, your characters are not. You're not a fighter. You're not a paladin, ranger, or anything like that. You start off with a profession. That's what you are, and that profession gives you a list of skills that you could get by spending points on. And the professions are like scribe. One of my favorites is the rat catcher, right? But there's and that's it. And there's a lot of professions. There's like, I forget how many in the core book, but there's at least 25 or 30 professions, and they're all very, very low, humble type of beginnings. And what happens is that you are in that profession, and I think there's 3 or 4 levels within that profession. And then if you want to leave that profession, you have to spend experience points to go from one profession to another. Now, you can't go from a rat catcher to a lowly baron, or not baron, but like a knight, or not a knight, but what's the knight helper? What do you call him? The one that helps the knight.
Sorry,
I know.
brain
We're both.
stopped for a second. I was again. It's a page, not a page. It's a
Something like that.
yeah.
But you don't really, you go from one profession to another, and each profession has a profession, or like a list of 2 or 3, maybe even 4 professions that you can move from one to another.
This part of when I was reading about this part, it reminded me of a traveler, right? Because you're
in the service.
Yeah, you're in the service, and you're rolling to see, what happens when you're in the service.
At least in this one, you get to choose what skills. It's not random what skills you get, because then that would really suck.
But it says you do this career thing, right? So you're either working as like a baker, a night watchman, a rat catcher, a farmer.
Yes, and farmer. I mean, can you imagine the skills that those guys got?
And then once the game starts, or your characters start to leave, or
acquire experience,
they're coming together to go on their adventure, then it kind of changes and develops more into maybe so maybe you're a thief, a wizard's apprentice, a druid, something like that, right? And then you're moving into either a mercenary, explorer, a different kind of field.
Right, you're no longer that thing, but that's your primary basis knowledge that you have, and the skills are tied to that profession. For example, me and Felipe played in a friends of ours games, and we played quite a bit, and never really got that powerful, but we did some pretty crazy things. But I was a scribe, and Felipe was I forget what he was. I think he was like a hedge wizard or something like that, because I think he could throw spells. I think, and that was the thing, is that he had put something on fire at his home, and I was his friend or something, so we ran away. We were from it's basically Spain. I think they call it Estalia.
Yes.
Right. And so all these, like Jolene said, this world is based on the Holy Roman Empire and its surrounding kingdoms or
baronies,
all that
counties,
stuff. Right.
cities.
So, and they don't necessarily like each other, right? So we had fled Estalia and went to Marienburg, which is, I guess, is kind of like a big city. I think it's somewhere in like really Central Europe. I don't think it's Germany, but it's like I'm thinking like Amsterdam or something like that, somewhere like that. Anyway, so we fled the city, and the city is like this huge, ugly medieval city. There's no, everything's dirty. Can you just imagine what a real medieval city would look like? A large metropolitan area, and
which I do, which is why I would want to play D&D instead of this. I'm just
yeah, this yeah, you're more like, this is like you're covered in mud, and then I think some of the things that really stand out about this game is that some of the things that they are within the rules, right? There's like 9 diseases that you can catch. That you can catch.
And if there's a table, don't roll on it.
And then there's always corruption, right? So
just so you know, Marienburg is the Soul city in Imperial Russia.
Oh
no. And the Wasteland. It's medieval Poland, Imperial Russia, and the Wasteland, whose Soul city is Marienburg, based on the Low Countries. Yeah, I'm not sure exactly what that means.
It's a big, ugly city, medieval city. There's like 9 diseases that your character can catch depending on being injured, and then there's like Jolene mentioned before, if you can get a critical hit on you, which causes you to roll on a critical hit table, and if you roll double zeros, that's instant death, right?
I think the most interesting part about this is it says a human level character can take probably 2 hits before they have to roll on the critical hit table, which you could instantly be killed, crippled, or permanently maimed. So it reminds me of the old school games, Traveler and Space Opera. I know I keep going back to Space Opera, but there's that table where you roll to see where you get hit.
Yeah,
which this totally reminds me of.
A lot of games have like location hit tables, but what reminds me of is this game called Iron Crown Industries. And they used to have a game called, it was a game called, what was it called? But they had like Spell Law, Claw Law, right? And they were famous for these critical hit tables. Like, people either liked or hated the system because it was a real complicated percentile system and stuff. Percentile system, of course. Yeah. But everybody would love all these tables depending on what kind of weapon you use, and it had critical hit tables for like really popular weapons. Like a bow had its own critical hit table versus a long sword versus a mace and stuff like that. And I still remember to this day, there's one critical miss or critical problem or whatever. It was really famous for critical tables, both critical hits and critical misses or mishaps. And one of them is, if you roll a certain number, I don't remember the number, but you could like flop off your own ear with a bow.
Yeah.
Right. And which causes you to lose 30% of your hearing or something like that. So it was interesting, not just 50% for some reason. So this kind of harkens back to that era because that Warhammer started in that period when people were making these very complicated games and trying to be simulationist, because D&D wasn't, right? D&D was a simulation from a miniature game, but it wasn't trying to...
Yeah, if you get hit, right, even if it's a critical hit, they still have to, well, depending on which version you're playing.
Right, that's true.
But there's not a table, and you're just taking hit point damage, right? It's not, they don't say, oh, you got hit in the shoulder and now you can't use it for a month. No, you can still stand up and fight the orc or whatever it is, and at the end, rest for 8 hours and regain your hit points. So there's not like it's a lot less gritty, right?
Right. Well, old D&D, I mean, at least old original D&D and AD&D, and I'm pretty sure second edition, was that if you for every hit point you had to rest a day, right? So if you were down 10 hit points, you had to rest 10 days, which makes it more realistic,
yes.
Sort of. But even then, like these games, like this game and Iron Crown Industries Law series, I forget what they called it, all combined, but they really tried to simulate that real grittiness of combat, right? Because if you're in combat, you're going to hit in certain locations, and certain locations going to do certain things to you. So that was theoretically the basis of their whole hit location and all these critical hit tables and stuff. So it does use, there's quite a bit of tables and charts, and it, it is not, it has all kinds of it has like a basic game, and then it has all these options you can throw in, of course, which makes the game even more crunchy and more has more rules and stuff to make it more realistic, right? I think what brought me to mention this game, it has nothing to do with the system really, but a little bit, but it has to do with the world, right? It has to do with the whole idea of how the world is and what your character can do. So in D&D, your character after probably third, fourth level can really kick butt, right? They can really start slinging some good spells. They can take a lot of damage. They can do a lot of damage, and they're really, approaching. They're really heroes already. And when they get to level 10, which usually is my limit of running the game, but even a little bit beyond that, the characters are so powerful that they became. They're like literally demigods in a certain sense, right? They're like gifted from the gods because the power that they wield is amazing, especially in spells and in it. Just a fighter can just go through a orc horde and stuff like that, and not really fear dying right away. Where in Warhammer, that's not going to happen. You're going to advance, but you're not gonna have 100 hit points. No, at any time an arrow can hit you, and you can literally die, no matter what level you are, because that's not the kind of game Warhammer is. It's really like down in the trenches type of warfare, and the warfare is you, a lowly person, versus the effects of chaos and corruption, and it's usually a battle you're not going to win. I mean, I forget what I was reading. I think it was an article about Warhammer, and it said that you basically should prepare yourself to have your character die multiple times because they're just not that powerful.
I totally agree.
But I mean, that's why I chose this one, because it's so different from D&D. I mean, I can't harp on that enough. Right. So not only is the game, everything's different has a different feel than D&D, and part of that is the grittiness and the deadliness of the system.
I found it interesting because it says that there's no regeneration or resurrection. So you have limited healing options, right, but you have limited, they have them in quotes, fate points, which represent the character's fate or destiny and offset this, giving them opportunities to avoid being crippled or dying.
Right. So
they're very few, right?
Right. I think you're right. In the latest incarnation of the rules, there's discipline points, fate points, fortune points, and there's another kind of point, resilience points. And basically all they do is they cheat the rules a little bit. They bend the rules for your character to survive. Like fortune, you can spend a fortune point or fate point, whatever, and you could avoid that death blow that you're going to receive, right? Or re-roll it or stuff like that. So there is some mitigating circumstances to the lowly, grimy, deadly game that this is, but it's very limited. It's a very limited resource, so you spend those very frugally, right? You don't want to spend those because the next time is really when they're gonna slice your head off, right? You're gonna have a critical hit.
It reminds me of, I want to say Paladin, but it's not Paladin. It's the other one,
Pendragon.
Yes, and the medieval kind of characteristics of, if you get hurt, you need to find a healer. You need to rest. You're going to be recuperating. I made up a word. Recovering.
Recuperating is a word. Recuperating.
It doesn't sound right.
I think it is.
The recuperation time would take a while. You'd need to let that wound heal for 2 months, especially if you're a knight or a what you want to call them, a mercenary person,
right?
For hire, you're gonna need that time because you can't swing your sword if your arm is hurt.
So what happens is in this game, violence isn't usually your first resort, right? Because you have to think the consequences of getting into a fight, and it's never good, right? There's always a chance you might get hurt, and then and let's say you get hurt, there's always a chance it might get infected with a disease, a blood will rot, and all these other things that can happen. So combat is very deadly, and the after effects of combat is very deadly. The game will not stall, but the game will stop as far as what you're doing on your adventure or your mission, and it would be a long delay, right? It would be a delay of days, even weeks of trying to recuperate those lost wound points or those points that you lost in battle. So I just really like the game in that sense because to me it's a 180 away from D&D, especially the 5th edition incarnation. And the 4th edition is a percentile system, and they went to in 3rd edition it used Fantasy Flight's special dice system, yes, which I think later was incorporated into the Star Wars system. Anyway, the latest edition went back to percentile system, and it brought back all the things that made Warhammer the game that it was. It's very brutal. It's very dark. It's gritty. It's all those kind of terms that usually don't describe D&D. And I think it's a really cool game. And I played it a couple times between different GMs. One GM was particularly very deadly, and another one we had a chance and gave us breaks, but we were still slogging through all kinds of
What kind of adventures though did you go on? Were you were you on a mission to take something to somebody, or were you? The weirdest part of this that I've seen was
what do you do?
There are these rat people that live underground.
Skaven, yes.
And I was reading about that.
They don't exist, by the way.
They don't exist?
They do, but people don't believe it.
So are they big rats?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. They're like...
This is my question. Okay. Do they disguise themselves if they come above ground? So that if you say people don't believe in them?
Yeah. I mean, they're like, I guess... They're ninja size.
If a big rat came walking towards me,
they wear clothes and armor and wear swords.
Okay,
right. But they usually wear big cloaks, right? So they can.
So they look.
They're about 5 feet, 5.5 feet tall. Well, probably a little bit shorter. I don't know what the average height in that world is, but they're shorter and they're stooped, right? Because they're rats. Kind of like Master Splinter.
Yes, that's exactly what I was.
So they wear cloaks.
But he's not 5 feet tall. He's only like 3 feet tall.
Oh, okay. So a little bit taller than that, I think. So they range in size, but I think they're about, I would say between 4 feet and 5.5 feet tall, the rats. But they're hunched over and they're just rats, right? Rat people, and they're part of the corruption that the Chaos Gods bring to Earth, right? And so, or to the world. I don't know.
It's not really Earth.
That's that, right? I think it's called Earth, URTH. So anyway, even if it isn't, that's pretty cool. So yeah, Skaven are these large rats that live underneath large cities because there's lots of stuff that they can take and eat.
Yeah, like rats and cities go together.
So our adventure, when I was playing with...
Chris or Shannon?
Well, I was playing with both of them. One was GM, Shannon was the GM. And when I was playing with Chris, Lisa, me, and Felipe, we were in Ty's game.
Oh, yeah.
And he really loved that world. And he had run like multiple campaigns that lasted years and years and years. And so he knew all about the world, right? So he was a really good GM. And basically we were kind of thrust together. Somehow he got us to know each other. Me, Felipe were together already. But...
Chris and Lisa
were together too. They were friends, and then there was other people involved. And we just kind of we saw this person sitting in the cage. That was their punishment, and we were like wondering what was going on. And it was that kind of thing. Like we were just curious.
I roll my eyes because that's medieval world. I just walk away.
But it piqued our curiosity. Why was this person in the cage? And then so nobody was allowed to talk to her, but we snuck up to her and talked to her in the middle of the night, and she told us her story. And we're like, wow, and that was it. We were hooked.
That's like Robert Jordan's the IL in the cage,
right? I think he let him go, right?
Of course.
I forgot what happened, but anyway, so that's Warhammer. It is dark, grittier, medieval type of world.
Is there anything else you want to tell us about Warhammer? Because you've gone way long on just the Warhammer part.
Just the Warhammer part.
I would say that we'll have to do another episode to do the other one.
Okay, there'll be a part 2, you saying?
Yes, because I don't think anyone wants to really listen to us talk for over an hour at one sitting.
At one sitting. We'll end it here, and we'll continue with part 2 of other games other than D&D. Maybe I'll also throw in another game.
But you don't have another. You only did 2. You only told me about 2.
Yes, that's true.
Well, okay. So since we have a couple more minutes here,
okay.
What was the other adventure that you went on?
I really don't remember. Don't remember. Shannon was running it, and me and Felipe
was it political intrigue?
I really don't remember. All I remember is that nobody liked us, and we were always being pushed around and what do you call it? Basically, they're being racist against us because we were halflings and humans like pushing us around. And I think at one point, me and Felipe's character stood up to one particular nasty figure or person, and we got in a fight. And we actually killed them. We were around a barn. I remember that part. Then we became wanted criminals because we had killed a human. So I don't remember what we were doing. I honestly don't remember what the adventure was about. I remember that was we were always being brutalized by the local people, and then we were by a barn. I think it was a large barn, and so we decided, well, this is the chance we got to take out this guy who was really being a pain in our butts. So we took him out, and then but he had friends, so it didn't end well for us. I don't think. I think the game ended, and we never finished the campaign or the scenario. I really don't remember what the scenario was about. But Ty, because we played so often, it was a much longer type of game, and it was something that he had come up with. So it had to do with this child that was supposedly had a lot of charm, and a lot of people were following him. He was like the Pied Piper, and so we were like, oh, we were checking out. And then the lady who was in the cage was somehow connected to that child. And it turns out that the child was a creature of chaos. So
he sounded like Pan with his flute.
Yeah, he didn't have
leading
a flute.
People astray.
He just I forget what happened. It became a riot, and he became he was in charge of the riot. Or he controlled the crowd enough, and everybody was like saying that then people were saying that he was the reincarnation of Sigmar, which is the great god that created or the human, I don't know what he feels, human or whatever. But he had created the empire, the Bretonian Empire, I believe. And, 1,000 years before, something like that. So, but he wasn't.
What I found most interesting about this game was that the history is pseudo history. So,
yeah.
So it makes it more interesting to me because you kind of know those areas and those times.
Right, when they use like real history but then just kind of tweak it a little bit. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, so I think the most interesting is, if you really want to get away from D&D, which is what the question was about.
Right.
This gives you the fantasy part, right, where you could be an elf if you were lucky enough to roll.
Or you could just choose it, right? You
could
choose it. And that's what we did. We and Felipe chose to be hobbits or halflings. And we didn't get the extra experience points.
Which I'm thinking is why probably Shannon was harder on you, because instead of if 90% of the population is human, although I was reading that because the other races were so rare that people weren't mean to them.
Oh, well,
I guess it just depends on your adventure, right?
Yeah, or your GM.
Yeah. It's a very interesting system. I don't know. It's a percentile system with lots of tables, and I'm not a big table fan, but I could see that it would be interesting to play.
Yeah, the mechanics are difficult, more difficult,
more crunchy.
It's more crunchy than D&D because it has like 10 attributes to start off with.
Yeah,
and that's a lot. And then there's all these rules about like your weapon skill, your blade skill. And it has to do with the tens digit. It gives you a bonus and all this other stuff. So it really is crunchy right off the bat.
So if you don't like that, you're you may not want to play this game.
Right,
But if you do like Crunchy or you like the world, then I would.
I think it's worth learning. I mean,
I would suggest finding a GM that runs it, so you don't have to start from scratch. That's all I'm saying.
Well, what's funny is that if you like this world, or even if you learn this system, there's a Warhammer 40K world, Warhammer 40K that uses the same system, uses the same percentile system. And once you learn both that system, it seemed to me that people who know the system easily know it, right? It was like, I was like, what? You know, when I was playing, just roll this. Oh, I think I'm dead. Oh, no, you're fine. You just got one wound. You don't take another wound. I go, oh, okay.
Don't take another wound.
I was like, okay. And it was fun, though. I really liked it. Like I said, it's just a totally different type of world or setting, and it's just a different vibe that you get off playing this game.
I mean, I could see it as it would kind of be like playing D&D, right? Because you're probably in a town and there's probably somebody either attacking it or somebody stealing stuff. I mean, you know, the normal things that happen. You're not necessarily the heroes going out to stop the bad guys, right? You're maybe just trying to save somebody's farm or something like that.
You could mimic the setting and run it in D&D 5th edition, but the problem is D&D 5th edition isn't meant to be deadly,
right?
Like this game is. And so it's not only a very different setting than your typical heroic D&D fantasy setting, campaign settings, but it's also the system matches the intent of or the manner of play, where you just don't go running into fights anytime and every time because you may not make it out.
Right.
So not only is it the world that's grittier and nastier and dirtier or whatever you want to call it, but the system is also deadly. So it makes playing it very different than you would play a D&D game. So that's why I think one of our friends, Shannon, says that he doesn't really like playing D&D anymore. He's played enough D&D. He doesn't need to play anymore. But he does like Warhammer Fantasy because it's a different type of game. It's deadlier and grittier. I mean, the setting is grittier, so it pairs well with the setting.
Right,
is a system.
Yeah, the system, interestingly enough, if it's a medieval realistic system
that tries to be realistic,
then crunchier is better because nothing was easy.
Right, and low hit points and all that stuff. Yeah.
So anyway, I'm not sure what else to tell you about this game other than it's very interesting. Yeah,
well, the latest book, I think they said there's 6 books on this game. No, that was Warhammer.
That's the other one.
Glory. So this is a core book. It has a core book. You can buy it, and it has all the rules that you need to run the game, and it has quite a bit setting material. It's available. I'm pretty sure. I mean, I haven't seen it lately in my game store, but it's rarely available anywhere. I think they just recently published it.
Maybe we're looking on the wrong shelf.
Well, there's always that. But I think it's a very, very interesting alternative to D&D. It's very unlike D&D. So if you're tired of the heroic goody two shoes type of role playing that happens in D&D a lot of times, this is a very good alternative to that, and it's quite fun.
There you go. This is Gaming Perspectives with
Saul
and Jolene.
And you have a good day.